They say mixing family with business is a mistake. I never believed that, at least not until the day my brother fired me. My name is Lily Maddox, and for the past 12 years, I was the director of operations at Maddox Company, a third-generation logistics firm that our grandfather founded with a single delivery truck back in 1958. My office wasn't glamorous, no wall-length windows or sleek leather chairs, but from that humble space, I kept our warehouses running smoothly, ensured contracts were delivered on time, and supported our staff like they were family. That all changed when my older brother Darren became CEO. It was a quiet Thursday morning when he called me into the boardroom. The atmosphere was thick with something new: forced smiles, tighter suits, and the ever-present consultant from McCallum Strategies, the one who whispered that I was old school when he thought I couldn't hear. Darren stood at the head of the table, flanked by 2 board members and a legal advisor. "Lily," he said, not meeting my eyes, "you've done a lot for the company, but we're entering a new era." I blinked. "Is this a restructuring meeting?" "No," he said, expression unreadable. "This is a termination, effective immediately. You're no longer needed here, little sister." His words didn't register right away. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to object, to say something. No one did. 12 years, Darren," I began, my voice catching. "I helped build this company with you." He gave a slight shrug. "You've done your part. Now it's time for the professionals to take over." He slid a folder toward me across the table. Inside, a severance agreement, an NDA, and a non-compete clause, all pre-signed. I closed the folder gently and stood up. "What about the vendor transition strategies? The international licensing project? The Portwell deal?" "We'll manage," he said dismissively. That word, manage, echoed in my mind like a steel door slamming shut. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I walked back to my office, picked up the framed photo of our grandfather standing proudly in front of his first delivery truck, weathered coat, broad grin, and began packing up my things. That afternoon, Amanda from accounting stopped by quietly. She didn't say much, just mouthed, "I'm sorry." I gave her a small nod, but inside, something had shifted. It wasn't grief. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. Darren believed I was replaceable. What he didn't know, what he never bothered to ask, was that for the past 18 months, I had been working closely with our largest vendor, SwiftLink Logistics, developing a proprietary scheduling system that saved them nearly $3 million a year by reducing shipping errors. That contract wasn't held by Maddox Company. It was with me. You see, our grandfather always used to say, "Don't just build a name, build leverage." I took that advice seriously. While Darren spent his time schmoozing with investors and posing for press photos, I was in the trenches forming real relationships, the kind that last. So when I walked out of that building, I didn't just leave behind a job. I stepped straight into an opportunity Darren never saw coming. The very next morning, I met with Marcus Ellington, CEO of SwiftLink. He shook my hand firmly, his smile touched with sympathy. "He really let you go?" he asked. "Didn't even blink," I replied. "But I've got a proposition." 3 days later, Maddox Company's largest vendor issued a sudden notice of contract termination, citing a misalignment of operational values. Friday morning, 9:14 a.m., Darren phoned their headquarters in a panic. But he didn't reach Marcus. He got me. "Hello," he barked, clearly expecting someone else. "This is Lily Maddox," I replied evenly, CEO of Ellington Maddox Logistics. Silence. "I believe you were calling about your canceled shipments." For a man who always loved hearing his own voice, Darren was suddenly speechless. I could practically hear his thoughts scrambling to make sense of what was happening. My voice on the other end, our biggest vendor now reporting to me. "I think there's been some kind of mistake," he said eventually. "I was trying to reach Marcus." "Marcus retired last week," I said calmly. "I purchased his share of the company. We've gone through a full restructure." "You?" His voice rose, incredulous. "You're running SwiftLink now?" "Ellington Maddox Logistics," I corrected. "And yes, you fired me, Darren. I had some time on my hands." I let the silence hang there, let him sit in it. I could feel the panic clawing its way into his voice. "This is absurd," he snapped. "We have a contract." "You had a contract," I said. "It expired last quarter. Marcus offered you a renewal. You ignored it." "You were too focused on hiring your McCallum consultants." I could almost hear the blood drain from his face. "But we've got shipments lined up, delivery routes confirmed. You can't just fire the person holding your entire supply chain together," I said flatly. "But you did." And then I hung up. The following days were pure chaos for Maddox Company. I didn't need insider intel to see it happening. I still had allies on the inside, people loyal to the company, even if not to my brother. They called, they texted, they vented. Warehouse 4 ran out of containers. Drivers sat idle, waiting for manifests that never came. 2 international clients received the wrong shipments and immediately began preparing penalty claims. Still, Darren refused to call me again. Instead, he scrambled to find a new vendor. But here's the thing about real partnerships. They're built on time, trust, and dependability, not rushed deals made in desperation. He called Freight North, then Transjet, then Ocean Path. Each one gave him the same answer: no available capacity. It wasn't personal, it was just business. Or at least, that's what it looked like on the surface. The truth was, I had been quietly forming a new alliance. 5 logistics companies who had grown tired of Darren's arrogance, his impatience, and the promises he never kept. We shared resources, talent, and, most importantly, information. Darren hadn't just lost a vendor, he'd lost access. That Friday evening, my father called me, for the first time since the day I was fired. "I don't want to be caught in the middle," he said gently, "but your brother is under a lot of pressure." "I'm aware," I replied. "He's not sleeping. The board's on his back. We've lost 3 major accounts this week." "I know." He went quiet for a few moments. "Lily, you always said you didn't want the spotlight." "I still don't." "Then why are you doing this?" I let out a long breath. "I'm not sabotaging Darren. I'm protecting what matters: our people, our clients, our reputation. He trusted me with those things for 12 years and never learned how to hold them himself." My father didn't respond. Not because he disagreed, because he knew I was right. 3 days later, I walked into a conference room at the Ellington Maddox headquarters, a modest building near Boston Harbor where the air still smelled like fresh paint and potential. My assistant, Nina, handed me a folder. "Update on the vendor expansion plan," she said. "Also, 3 of your former warehouse managers want to come on board. They've already submitted resignations." I opened the folder slowly. Inside were resumes, letters, and notes from people I had mentored, trusted, and championed. People Darren had ignored or pushed aside. "You think they're ready?" I asked. Nina smiled. "They said, 'Wherever Lily goes, we go.'" What I felt wasn't revenge. It was something steadier, more powerful: momentum. That same week, Maddox Company's stock dropped 7% after a supply chain analyst reported critical disruptions in their logistics partnerships. Industry newsletters ran with the story, speculating on internal instability, leadership failures, and potential layoffs. Then came the whispers. Lily Maddox didn't disappear. She's back, and she's building something. I never confirmed anything. I didn't need to. People were connecting the dots themselves. Darren, meanwhile, doubled down. Publicly, he claimed everything was under control. Behind closed doors, he slashed budgets, cut hours, and pushed his teams to do more with less. Morale plummeted. Resignations surged. He didn't understand the truth our grandfather always lived by. The heart of a business isn't its tech, its branding, or its shiny new consultants. It's the people, and people remember how you treat them. On a quiet Saturday morning, I returned to our grandfather's grave for the first time in 5 years. I brought coffee and sat on the old bench beneath the oak tree he used to love. "I know this isn't the company you envisioned," I said quietly, "but I'm doing my best." The wind stirred the leaves above me, and for a moment I could almost see him there, smiling with that familiar crooked grin. The one that always meant, "Keep going." I pulled out my phone and opened a spreadsheet. Numbers, trends, margins. Each figure resonated like a melody I'd memorized long ago. Slowly but surely, the puzzle pieces were falling into place. And Darren hadn't even realized the storm was only just beginning. Darren had always been the showman. Even when we were kids, he'd gather our cousins in the backyard and declare himself captain, assigning chores like we were preparing for a military mission. He lived for attention, thrived on being admired, and when he became CEO, he believed those same instincts would protect him. But business isn't a talent show. And the spotlight can turn harsh when results don't match the performance. By mid-month, the rumors about cracks in Darren's leadership weren't just rumors anymore. They were headlines. The high-priced consultants from McCallum Strategies had promised streamlined systems and scalable growth. Instead, they gutted frontline teams, renegotiated supplier terms without understanding the logistics, and rolled out a warehouse platform so complex it required a week of training just to process a shipment. Deliveries were delayed, clients were outraged. Inside the company, employees had started saying what no one had dared before. Maybe Lily was the one who actually ran the show. Then, on a Tuesday morning, I received an unexpected call from Vanessa, a board member I hadn't heard from since the day I was let go. "I hope it's okay that I'm reaching out," she said carefully. "Of course," I replied, intrigued. "Is it true?" she asked. "About you and SwiftLink. Sorry, Ellington Maddox?" I didn't confirm anything. "Why do you ask?" She exhaled. "Because we've got a serious situation. Darren briefed the board last night. Our 4 biggest clients are threatening to walk." He blamed the vendors, didn't he? "Yes, but—" She hesitated. "But those problems started right after he fired the one person managing those accounts," I said, finishing the thought. "Exactly." There was a beat of silence before she spoke again. "Would you ever consider coming back to Maddox Company?" I didn't pause. "No. Not even in a senior role? I'm not interested in fixing a disaster I warned them not to create," I said gently. "Especially when I spent over a decade protecting everything they're now losing." She didn't push back. "I thought you should know. We've scheduled a special board session for Friday, a performance review. It's going to be rough." I thanked her and ended the call, my mind already turning. Darren wouldn't see it coming, and that was exactly the problem. That afternoon, I met with my legal advisor, Eva Chin, at a quiet cafe in the heart of downtown. I had brought a thick folder full of contracts, partnership agreements, growth projections, and client testimonials. "I want to make sure we're covered," I told Eva. "This isn't just about competing anymore. It's about preserving a legacy." Eva flipped through the documents, nodding as she read. "These are solid. You're not just expanding, Lily. You're becoming the go-to alternative." "That's the goal." She looked up, meeting my eyes. "You know Darren might try to sue, right? Accuse you of interference, stealing IP, anything he can spin." I gave a quiet smile. "Let him. I didn't chase a single client. They came to me." And it was true. I hadn't poached anyone. I hadn't schemed or whispered behind closed doors. I'd just stayed put while everything Darren built began to collapse under the weight of its own flaws. Meanwhile, Maddox Company was unraveling faster than their PR team could contain. A photo surfaced on LinkedIn. Me shaking hands with the COO of Carrington and Ellis, our former largest client. The caption read, "New partnerships, new possibilities." Within hours, the industry was buzzing. Forums lit up. Analysts called Darren's leadership erratic. Maddox and Company was labeled a high-risk partner. And then came the resignations. Not from executives, but from the people who actually kept things running. Logistics coordinators, warehouse supervisors, drivers. Most of them reached out to me. That Friday, Darren stood in front of the board, 10 individuals who had once championed his vision. Now they wanted answers. He opened with a polished speech about temporary setbacks and agile strategies. But the numbers told a harsher story. Net revenue had plunged 14% in 6 weeks. Client retention was plummeting. Internal feedback showed employee morale had hit a historic low. Then, Vanessa passed around a report. It had been compiled by a third-party analyst, objective, thorough, damning. Under Darren's leadership, Maddox and Company had lost 38% of its operational value due to failed system rollouts, vendor instability, and executive-level mismanagement. Darren tried to deflect blame on legacy systems, market conditions, and inevitably, on me. But no one was listening anymore. That evening, something happened I never expected. He came to my condo. When I opened the door, he stood there, shoulders rigid, tie undone, eyes shadowed by exhaustion. "I need to talk," he said. I stepped aside, and he walked in, pacing the living room like a man cornered. "Do you know what they said in that meeting?" he asked, voice tight. "They think I've destroyed everything." I said nothing, just let him speak. "Do you know what it's like to be told you're not good enough?" he went on. "That you're just keeping the seat warm until someone better shows up?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," I said quietly. "I do." He froze. I rose to my feet. "You didn't just fire your sister, Darren. You fired the only person who ever told you the truth, and now you're standing on a throne made of sand." He didn't argue. He just gave a slow nod, defeated, and left without another word. The following Monday, after Darren had shown up at my door, the Maddox Company board called an emergency vote. I wasn't there, of course. I hadn't set foot in that building since the day he let me go, but I heard how it unfolded. Vanessa told me later that Darren walked into the room looking worn out, his voice subdued, his presentation unusually brief. For the first time in his tenure as CEO, there were no grand visuals, no catchy slogans, no bold predictions, only explanations and excuses. The vote wasn't unanimous. It didn't have to be. 5 of the 9 board members approved a motion to strip Darren of his executive authority, pending a full performance audit. The language was technical and formal, but everyone knew what it meant. Darren was still CEO, on paper, but his actual power was gone, effective immediately. What came next, however, caught everyone off guard. The board didn't look inward to replace him. They reached out to me. I opened the email at my kitchen table, coffee in hand, sunlight flooding the room like something had shifted. The subject line was simple. "We would like to invite you to a private meeting to discuss strategic options for Maddox and Company. Your perspective is vital. Vital. 12 years of unseen labor, of long mornings, careful wins, and quiet resilience. And now, finally, vital." I stared at the screen for a while, then closed the laptop. That evening, I took a slow walk through our old distribution yard in Everett. The place used to feel like a second home. I could still name every crew chief and remember which loading bay always jammed in the winter. I thought of my grandfather, us sitting on the edge of Dock 3 while he sipped tea from a dented thermos, pointing out flaws in the flow of trucks. "It's never the slowest part that breaks a supply chain, Lily. It's the part no one's watching." That's what the company had become, a system failing from the neglected parts. Now the board wanted me to restore it, but I wasn't sure I wanted to. At the meeting the next day, they gave me the seat directly opposite the head of the table, Darren's old spot. He wasn't there. "Thank you for coming," Vanessa said. Others nodded, some with forced smiles, others avoiding my gaze. "We need your insight," said Gregory, a senior board member who once dismissed my work as just logistics. I looked around at the faces of people who had stood by in silence while my brother erased me from our family's company. "You're in a tough spot," I said calmly, "and I get that. But let me be clear, I'm not here to take over. I've built something of my own now, something I believe in." I saw the flicker of disappointment ripple through the room. "But I will help," I added, raising my eyes to meet theirs. "On one condition." Vanessa leaned in. "What's that?" "I want full access to the financials, the vendor contracts, staffing data, everything. No more secrets, no more internal politics. If you want me to help stabilize this company, then I need to know exactly how broken it really is." The board agreed, unanimously. And just like that, I stepped back into the company. Not with a title, not with a press release, but with purpose. I became the invisible CEO. No name on the door, just the real work. The deeper I dug, the worse it became. One major client had filed a breach of contract lawsuit. Several supplier agreements were set to auto-renew, with inflated pricing clauses Darren had clearly never reviewed. 3 of our warehouses were understaffed, and one hadn't undergone a compliance inspection in months. But what cut deepest weren't the contracts or the operational gaps. It was the internal emails I uncovered, messages exchanged between Darren and the McCallum consultants. "She's too soft to lead," one of them had written. "Too emotional, too close to the staff." Too emotional. The phrase lodged itself in my chest, as if empathy was a weakness, as if remembering the names of employees' kids somehow made me unfit to lead. They didn't get it. People stay for leaders who care, and most of those people were now with me at Ellington Maddox. One night I called Miguel, my former warehouse lead from the Brooklyn facility. He now managed one of our new depots with a loyalty you couldn't train, buy, or fake. "Do you think we could handle a temporary supply boost?" I asked him. He didn't even pause. "For Maddox? Yes, but they won't know it's coming from us." He laughed. "You really are your grandfather's granddaughter." We rerouted inventory, quietly reinforced routes, sent backup trucks to clients still under the Maddox banner. No press releases, no credit, just silent support. Sometimes revenge wasn't loud. Sometimes it was help withheld, then returned on your own terms. A week later, I received a short message from Darren. "Thank you. I know it was you." 7 words. No apology, no explanation. But maybe, just maybe, a trace of recognition. I didn't reply. Some things don't require answers. The foundation was still cracked, but it was holding, and I was done being the quiet backbone. Now, I was the architect. The board scheduled its final vote on Darren's position for a Friday morning. I wasn't officially invited, but Vanessa had already texted me, "Please stay close." Just in case. By that point, I'd gone through every document, every contract, every misguided policy Darren had touched. The full picture was clear, not of a villain, but of a man in over his head. He hadn't meant to break Maddox and Company. He'd just been too proud to admit he couldn't carry it. But intent didn't undo the damage. That morning, I sat in a small cafe across the street, laptop open, phone silent, tea cooling beside me. I stared through the glass at the building that had once been my second home. It felt like watching someone you love go into surgery, hopeful but prepared. Inside, tension filled the boardroom. Vanessa later told me Darren arrived dressed for battle, dark suit, sharp tie, all the confidence he could muster. He brought slides, charts, a revised business plan. But it was too late. The data was in. The clients were gone. And trust? Irreparable. Then came Darren's last card, the one no one expected. "I've secured a private investor," he announced, flipping to the final slide. "They're willing to contribute $4.2 million in exchange for a minority stake and a board seat." That got attention. Gregory leaned forward. "Who's the investor?" Darren hesitated. "I'm not at liberty to name them until after the vote." And that was his fatal error. The board sensed the bluff instantly. It wasn't a strategic move. It was desperation, an attempt to stall the inevitable. But the board wasn't looking for a delay. They were looking for leadership. And Darren, no matter how sharply he dressed, no longer commanded confidence. When the board called the vote, 7 members responded. 6 voted to remove him. 1 abstained, Vanessa. She told me later, "I didn't vote because I couldn't be the one to push him over the edge, but I also couldn't be the one to save him." With that, Darren was officially out. 2 hours later, I received a call from the board chair. "We've appointed an interim leadership team," he said, "but we'd like to formally bring you in." "Under what conditions?" I asked. "We're open to negotiation." I closed my laptop and let out a long breath. The moment I had quietly envisioned was now reality. The company that had cast me aside wanted me back, to repair what Darren had damaged. But I wasn't the same person they fired. I had built something better, something leaner, more human, and more respected. Ellington Maddox wasn't just thriving, it was trusted. So I asked for what I knew was bold. "I want joint ownership," I said. A controlling share equal to the board's collective stake. If you want me to rebuild this company, I want to own the ground it stands on this time." There was a pause. I didn't let it hang. "I'll bring my team, stabilize client accounts, restore vendor relationships, and repair our public image, but I won't report to anyone who stood silent while I was pushed out." To my surprise, they didn't reject the offer. They asked for a proposal. That night, Darren texted me, "You in? Coffee?" We met at an all-night diner by the docks, the kind of place our grandfather used to love. Worn booths, perfect pancakes, and waitresses who knew your name by the second visit. Darren looked drained, more than I'd ever seen. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," he said quietly. "I know." "I always thought you'd be in the background," he continued, "holding things together while I took us forward." "You didn't take us anywhere, Darren," I said. "You walked ahead without ever checking if anyone was behind you." He nodded slowly. "So, what now? You're taking over?" "No," I told him. "I'm not taking over. I'm taking it back. The people, the mission, the legacy. You can resent me if you want, but it was never just yours." He didn't argue. He pushed away his plate, stood, and said, "For what it's worth, you deserved the title long before I ever wore it." I didn't answer. Some things don't need words. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, finalized the proposal, and submitted it to the board. By the end of the week, it was approved. Maddox Company would officially merge with Ellington Maddox in a dual-brand transition. I was named managing director of the new entity, with full authority over restructuring, employee retention, and client relationships. There were headlines, blog posts, and quiet congratulations from people who once called me too soft to lead. But I didn't care about any of that. What mattered to me was the staff meeting I held that following Monday. I stood at the front of the very same room where Darren had fired me and looked out at the crowd, familiar faces I hadn't seen in months. "I'm not here to celebrate," I began. "I'm here to rebuild. With you." A quiet murmur rippled through the room. I know what's been broken, and I know who broke it. But more importantly, I know who kept this place running when it could have fallen apart. There were tears, applause, quiet, knowing smiles. This wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. 6 months after the merger, I walked through the newly renovated Maddox Cumber headquarters, coffee in one hand, hard hat in the other. The building was alive again. Voices echoed through open-plan workspaces. Forklifts hummed in the background. There were new faces, returning veterans, and old friends, many of whom I hadn't seen since the day I was let go. They didn't whisper anymore. They smiled, stopped me in the hallway, shared ideas, celebrated wins. In return, I made one commitment: no corner offices, no closed doors. Leadership wouldn't be a label, it would be a presence. The new Maddox wasn't flashy, but it was strong. We reinvested in employee training, restored full benefits, and launched a leadership rotation program to mentor future managers from within. Slowly, the company became what it always had the potential to be, not a monument to legacy or ego, but a platform for people. That fall, I attended a logistics summit in Chicago. On the final evening, I was invited to join a panel titled "Resilience in Legacy Businesses." When it was my turn, the moderator asked, "What's the most important lesson you've learned since taking over your family's company?" I didn't hesitate. "Legacy isn't what you inherit," I said. "It's what you build when no one's watching." There was a pause, then a wave of soft applause. Not because it was flashy, but because it was honest. That winter, I received a letter from Darren. Not a message, not a text, a real handwritten letter. Just a few lines in his stiff, overly neat handwriting, the kind he used when he was trying too hard to get it right. "Lily, I've taken a role with a nonprofit that mentors underprivileged youth. I'm learning how to listen." Finally, the note ended with a line I hadn't expected. "Thank you for holding the family together, even when I didn't deserve to be part of it." D. I folded it carefully and placed it in the top drawer of my desk, next to our grandfather's old pocket watch and a faded photograph of the original delivery truck taken in 1959. I was learning that forgiveness doesn't always need to be spoken out loud. Sometimes it's just a door you leave unlocked, quietly, in case someone finds the courage to walk back through it. In January, I returned to the original Everett warehouse, but this time I wasn't alone. A couple dozen employees, some new, some who had been with us through every hard year, stood beside me on that freezing morning as we unveiled a small brass plaque bolted just outside loading dock 3. It read, "In memory of Harold Maddox, who taught us that the strongest parts of any company are the ones you can't see." Miguel wiped at the corner of his eye. "He would have loved this," he said. I nodded, running my gloved hand gently over the engraved letters. "He'd have hated the plaque, though," I added. "Said it was too fancy." Everyone laughed, and for a moment it felt like he was standing there with us. That evening, I sat on my balcony overlooking the harbor, the same place I had sat the morning after Darren fired me. Same view, same water, but everything had changed. A soft knock came at the door. My niece and nephew stood there, Darren's kids, holding a tray of misshapen cookies and 2 steaming mugs of cocoa. Their mother waited in the car, but the 2 of them came bounding in like they'd done it 100 times before. "Uncle Darren said you're the boss of everything now," Ava declared proudly. I smiled. "Only the boring parts." "Can we come see the trucks again?" Jack asked, eyes wide with curiosity. "Of course," I said, "but only if you promise to wear a hard hat." They giggled. Family had become complicated, scraped up, scarred in places, but not broken. And I had worked hard to make sure the cracks between the adults didn't become chasms for the next generation. Because if this whole journey had taught me anything, it was this: power fades, titles shift. But what we pass down, that's what shapes the future. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, I looked out at the water one more time, not to reflect, but to rest. Everything I had built, lost, and rebuilt was rooted in one truth I carried like armor. Success was never about proving someone wrong. It was about proving something right. That kindness is not weakness. That stability doesn't need applause. That those who wait, who observe, who quietly hold things together, they're not just survivors, they're architects. And that foundations matter. Because anyone can sit in the corner office, but only a few truly understand what holds the whole building up.